everyone. Welcome to the OU Educators Panel. I'm just going to ask you a few questions and it'll be great. Okay, question number one. What are the principles used when making your educational decisions in a COVID era? What are the principles used when making your educational decisions in a COVID era?
Do you want one of us to go first?
Yeah, sure. Shaindy, why don't you go first?
I would say that the principles I use is obviously keeping the science in mind and listening to the law of the city that we particularly live in. But most importantly, also thinking about Das Torah and thinking about the mental, emotional safety of our students as well, and try to merge and fuse those together to create something that feels sustainable and will help our students be as successful as we can within the limitations. And at the same time, like I said before, keeping the Das Torah in mind, which is it's so important for kids to be connected to Torah and so important for them to learn and so important for them to be together. And within what is in our choice box, guiding our school and our students and our parents as best as we possibly can.
Beautiful. Rabbi Block, did you just unmuted or you were unmuted? You want to go next?
Sure. I think what Shaindy said is really does resonate. I think that we're constantly thinking about all of those elements. I think it's really important to think about obviously how every element of the student's well-being, which is not just how are they learning on Zoom, right? But their emotional state's really important. And I think that was really, really well said. I would just add that for us, there's a piece here that gets beyond just the factors that we're considering in terms of the emotional well-being, and we want to get the kids back for Torah and all of that. But there's also how we go about making those decisions, I think is really important. And I think that there's so many competing values in these moments that it's hard to say that there's one person is absolutely right and another person's absolutely wrong. And whenever we make decisions, I'm positive this is true for all of our schools, that there are going to be parents who are going to be upset or furious or happy on both sides, no matter what we decide. And I think how we go about making those decisions and how we go about stretching ourselves to consider a broad range of views, then actually having conversations with the stakeholders and saying, I understand what you're saying. These are the considerations that we talked about, and we're going to share those with our students and let them know that it's not black and white. And that nuance, I think, is really important, because sometimes I think to students and to parents, decisions seem very, very easy. Like, this is what you chose. Well, did you consider the other side? And I think in this case, when the other side is so obvious and students understand that there are competing values, to actually talk with them about how we work through those and think in a little bit more of a nuanced way is really valuable.
Beautiful. That's great.
I like that a lot, Rabbi Block. I think what you said, truly resonates. I agree.
I would just add that the key to it, and I think Rabbi Block was alluding to it, is the transparency of why you're making the decision that you're making, because there's so many different opinions out there from people, and I think Mrs. Gross, Das Torah was a beautiful answer, and different institutions rely on different Das Torah, which have difference of opinions. And just as each institution has, I'm sure, is comprised of a different medical task force, right? That's a fun buzzword for schools now. Our medical task force has said X, or due to our medical task force, right? And there are different opinions amongst different medical task, forces. What's there? So I think what's super important is that the transparency of why you're making the decision, so people at least understand what the institution stands for. So whether speaking about the Das Torah, who that Das Torah is, after consulting with Rav so-and-so, and our medical task force, which is comprised of an ID specialist or someone in the Department of Health, or this type of doctor, that type of parent, these types of lay leaders. And this is why we've come to the conclusion. I remember in one of the letters that we wrote to our community, we wrote that, when we decided that we were going to have shir on campus, or we're having minyan on campus and not having school on campus. One of the things we said was, we recognize that for some, this will be incredibly uncomfortable, and for others, this will just not be enough. But understand why we're making a decision we're making, and we welcome the disagreements. And that transparency is so important. So at least when people disagree, they know what they're disagreeing on, and they're not, and why, and the reasoning behind it. So I found that to be very healthy in this process.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. So I obviously am in agreement with Rabbi Sufrin, because in terms of the medical task force, most of our schools did work together on that. So I won't take any more time, and I'll just go to question number 2. But thank you so much. It seems like we're all on the same page, honestly, in terms of who we look to, the medical task force. We do rely heavily on the medical task force, and it's just thank God for them, because we probably call them 10 times a day. And I'm sure Rabbi Block and Ms. Gross feel the same way. Okay, question number 2.
Yes, we do.
How do you see the roles of parents changing during this time? How do you see the roles of parents changing during this time? So I'll just start very quickly, just something that I noticed, which I thought was pretty powerful, is that our parents are sitting by the side of their kids and really experiencing education on the front lines, and seeing what the students and their kids are doing in their specific classes, and seeing the caliber of teacher, the caliber of academics that all our schools have, but specifically their own child. And they recognize that they've never ever been in their kids' class. So I think in a sense, they're a little bit more bought in, because they recognize that the teachers are working so hard on the relationship, on the academics, on being creative with Zoom technology. And I think it really sat well with them. So I think for all of us, I don't know if I speak for all of us, but I think for all the parents, at least in my schools, that they're more bought in when it comes to the education and the social emotional aspect of the school. And they really believe in the caliber of our education. And I've had parents call me and say, I'm learning AP US history right now. I'm learning AP Euro. I'm in Algebra 1. I haven't learned algebra in 20 years. This is amazing. I can help my child. So I think they really are on the front lines, and it's really great, especially for the relationship between a parent and a child. They also recognize that the relationship between a teacher and a child is extremely important for the social and emotional well-being of a child during this time. And, having the parents on the front line, again, I think we could all say that when a parent is bought in, it really helps the process in such a difficult time.
I think, Mrs. Williams, what's interesting is I think you recovered it more from an educational appreciation. But I think what has been fascinating to see is that I find that at least parents are just so much more appreciative of what a school environment, the importance of a school environment for their child, right? And the importance of that the school is more than just a place where you're learning Torah, or you're learning science, or you're learning Ivrit, or whatever the subject is. But that experience, the experiential part, how integral and important is to the growth of their child. To see their son at home, parents are definitely more attuned to the social emotional needs of their children than probably ever before, because the typical average for a family was that their son or daughter left in the morning, came back late at night. They didn't really have a great appreciation or understanding what happened in between those times. I mean, they had an idea to read the newsletters, check out the social media, hear what was reported back. But that focus on that social emotional piece, and how a school plays such an integral role, I think is incredible. But what's happening, which is so much more beautiful, is that it's almost forced parents to have to step up to the plate. Say, well, there's a gap here. My child is not getting something that he or she normally has gotten. And I don't know this to be true, but I feel like Shabbos table discussions are just much more wholesome these days. And I feel like there are more families having dinner during the week when it's not a Thanksgiving. And I feel like there's just more meaningful things happening at home. I'm not saying it couldn't be better for all of us, but there's more of that focused effort. So I think the way to answer the question, how are the roles of parents changing during this time, is I think they're investing more into their family. Not that they weren't invested, but shifting the energy a little bit differently, that I think is going to be more beneficial for the child, which I think is definitely going to be positive for their relationships, at least in the home.
Great. Rabbi Block?
Yeah, sure. I definitely am seeing that shift also, and it really resonates. I think there are a few other pieces in which, or ways in which parents can really be helpful in this process and kind of partner with us. And I know we're talking about the role of parents kind of in isolation, but I think it ought to be talked about in partnership with us. One of the things that first of all, it really gets to what we were talking about before about kind of the nuance and subtlety of the situation. So parents are often, they can express their voices pretty loudly. And they have WhatsApp groups, like the kids have WhatsApp groups, and they rile each other up like the kids rile each other up. And I think it's important to try to talk to parents about the concept, not just of grit, that sounds perhaps a little bit cliche, but the idea of, hey, this is something that we have to work through and it's not easy. And there's actually, sometimes we stretch ourselves beyond. We have parents who are doing in both ways, parents who, wouldn't have thought that we should be open for Judaic studies right now, but they know it's important for their kids and are willing to send their kids for that, even though they're uncomfortable. And that's a really valuable conversation to have. And I think that's on the other side also. It could be that parents are really want their kids to be, but they really need to take a stand right now because they have someone who's, let's say, immunocompromised in the home, and to talk about how difficult that decision is. And it gets back to what we were talking about before. I do think that the values are important. The other piece is, right now, a lot of factors are being isolated, right? So when you have, it was very easy to send your kid, not easy, it's never easy, but easy to send your kid to a day school when your business is going well and you have the income and you can afford it. And that's much harder now. So we're helping, and I'm sure we're all doing, our very best to help all of those families. But I'm sure it's also a conversation. Some parents like to keep it private, and I respect that. Some parents make it very well known to their kids. I think there's value in at least expressing that, hey, we're going to stretch ourselves a little bit more, because in this time, it's really important that our kids have an environment of ruchnis, have an environment of Talmud Torah. It's important that we had our optional tefillah. Now, thank God, we're able to have, because of Jake studies on campus, we're able to have it every day. But when we were not doing that, and we were having an optional tefillah in the morning, the parents who kind of came with their kids was I think a real message of chizuk, that this is right now, this is really hard. It's hard to get out of bed as early as we used to, right? But this is a value, and I think that sort of partnership of just talking about the things, and it could be in the same way, Rabbi Sufrin, it could be in the way that you said, and it could be what you said as well, Ms. Williams, that when we're looking, sitting at a Shabbos table, talk about those things. Talk about the things that are most important to you right now, and what's changed, and how we, how we constantly are looking to take the most of it. So I think those values are an important conversation.
Great, thank you.
Do you want me to weigh in, or you want to move on?
Sure, no, totally weigh in.
I mean, I really appreciate what the three of you said. I'm going to echo Rabbi Block. It resonates tremendously, and I guess the only thing that I think I might want to add is, and I think it's been said, is parents have to be more focused and more aware of what's going on in their children's lives than ever before. In the past, if you had a very capable daughter and she did well in high school, you can kind of, let's say a parent has a younger child enrolled now and they put an older child through high school. If that child was capable and did well in school, so they were kind of marginally aware of what was going on. Maybe they felt appreciative. So to echo Rabbi Sufrin, now they are more appreciative. They're going to express that more. But I think more than ever, there's no cruising. There's no cruising right now. Even your best, most capable student is struggling with something, or having a hard time learning at home over Zoom, or feels like it's just too much. So I would say that the roles of parents changing for high schoolers is they just have to be more aware, and they have to they have to be much more invested in what their children are doing, and they can't take that back seat that perhaps they may have taken in the past.
Sure. That's true. Thank you so much. Okay, question number 3. What do you want parents and community members to know when raising kids and partnering with schools? I, okay, I'll start if you want. I could just start quickly, just so you guys have a few minutes to think. So basically, a couple things that I want to talk about, excuse me, is I feel like the one thing that I think parents have to do when partnering with schools, because I think it's twofold, is keeping, I think many of you guys said it throughout your ideas, but really just keeping a calm home. I think parents, what's the most important for our kids today, and I'm not even just speaking about high school kids, it really goes to elementary school, early childhood, middle school, keeping a calm home and telling their kids that they are going to be okay. Because I think when the home is calm, it spills into the school. When the school is calm, it spills into the home. And telling kids that they're going to be okay and teaching them that they have the ability to gain resilience over this time. Resilience is like a muscle. If we have the ability to strengthen this muscle at any point that we can. And any point that we strengthen this muscle, the kids are growing. And I really think like my whole experience with Corona, COVID, this entire time is that our kids, it was never enough. Everything we were doing was never enough. They were, we would take them on a Shabbaton and they'd have a great time. But then the next Shabbaton, we'd try to top the previous Shabbaton and who we were bringing in and this and that. And now at this point, unfortunately, kids had no camp this summer. They had the world stripped from beneath them. They were not allowed to see friends, not allowed to go to school. And now the basic things that they really care about, like Rabbi Sufrin, you said, and Rabbi Block, and even Mrs. Gross, you said also about just coming to school and just being together and the social and emotional interaction between you and a Rabbi, or you and a science teacher, or you and a friend. That's what's most important to these kids right now, as opposed to all the extra glitz and glam that they were getting. And I really believe that the kids have built such a tough resilience that in the end, this generation will, God willing, Mir Tashem, be better off in the future because of this. Obviously, we didn't want this to happen, but through all of this that's going on, I think it's really important for them to have this experience it in a positive way with a calm home, a calm school, and be able to work on this resilience and ultimately be stronger coming out on the other side.
I really like that.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. I would just say, the mitzvah, as the Gemara in Yevamos, quotes the pasuk in Emor, where Rashi says, "Lahazir gedolim ala kitanim," right? The mitzvah of chinuch, right? Parents have a mitzvah. It's a commandment. It's a responsibility to educate their children, and relying on schools and being able to pay mechanchim or institutions to be able to educate your child is part of you fulfilling your mitzvah, but it's not instead of any other obligation you have. And you still have to do your part. So the expectation might not be on you to teach that Sugya Gemara, or to teach that halacha as they would get in shir, because you've hired someone to do that. But your engagement in your child's school will have an impact on his or her success in learning. And that's just research, that's data driven. Parents who are engaged in their schools will contribute to their students' health and learning. You'll see higher grades and test scores. You'll see better behavior in the student. You'll see enhanced social skills, and you'll see less substance abuse. You'll see less, challenges. And of course, it's not perfect, the data, but it gives you an idea of how important it is for you to be an engaged parent in your child's life, and not to be your child's friend. Your child will have plenty of friends as they go through life, but to be his or her mom or dad. And those factors make, or chas v'shalom, can break a child. And they can have the best school, and they can have the best rebbeim, or the best mechanchot, or the best curriculum, the best campus. But if that engagement with mom and dad, partnering with the schools and being involved in the life is not there, there is such a crucial missing ingredient that you're not doing your part. You're not doing your part in lahazir gedolim al haketanim, and being that mitzvah of chinuch. I would also say that when it came to Matan Torah, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu need to have us see the thunder and hear the lightning and create this whole show? Just the Torah should have just been good enough, right? You got the Torah, here it is. It's like, wow, this is the Torah. Why do we need this whole this whole is like theatrical experience to receive the Torah? And the Sfarim HaKadoshim bring down is because Torah is not just meant to be this intellectual subject that we learn and we discuss and we bring in different commentaries and have this intellectual conversation, and therefore it just the way that one would have with the professor in college. The Torah needs to be experiential. Torah needs to be a part of who you are. It needs to be an experience. It needs to be something that's so exciting, that's so great. And you need to be able to show them that excitement. And seeing the excitement in learning, the best way for is hearing an echo.
There's an echo. Hold on. Okay, maybe start again. What you were just saying in that last sentence.
Okay. So what I was saying is one of the best ways to show your child excitement in learning, right, is yes, Yula Boys High School is an amazing campus and with amazing technology, and you come in and we'll wow you and we'll excite you. We have an incredible Talmidei Chachamim as Rabbi and phenomenal teachers, and it's incredible. But if you're asking me, what's the best way to excite your child in learning? It's on Friday night, when your son is exhausted or your daughter's exhausted and they had a long week and you just had a beautiful Shabbos table and you're exhausted and mom is exhausted, everyone's tired, and you open up a sefer and you sit at your table. You don't even ask your son and daughter to learn with you. You don't even ask them, but they just know that you are white. You are white. There's nothing you'd rather do right now than just go to sleep. You open up that Gemara to finish the Daf Yomi on the day, or you open up that lesson a day book or that Hello, whatever it is. And even if you fall asleep into the Gemara, but they see that you're so excited by it, it's so meaningful in your life. They see how you're modeling it. That is also parent engagement. Parent engagement is your investment into the school, into the institution, to the chinuch where your son or daughter is getting the educational experience. But parent engagement is also modeling chinuch. It's also it's modeling what it is. I want you to learn because Torah is important. So therefore, you need to see me learn, right? I want you not to talk during tefillah. So when I go to davening, that hour or two I'm in shul, I can't be on my phone. I have to be modeling that. So I guess where I'm going with this. The engagement is important. What do I want most parents, community members to know when raising kids and partnering with schools? It's your engagement in the institutions that your children are learning will help them succeed within that institution. But your engagement in modeling what you want them to learn is really ultimately going to be what helps them, get to the next level. Rabbi Abramczyk, a Rebbe in our school, I forget who he quotes, always tells me, worry less that they're not listening and worry more that they're watching you. And I he quotes, and it's an investment in the next generation. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs that's shared with me personally when I was walking with him in LA from a hotel to Beth Jacob. He quoted Confucius, and I always remembered this quote. And he said, if you want to plan for a year, Rabbi Sufrin, quoting Confucius didn't say Rabbi Sufrin, although that'd be very impressive if he did, right? But he said, if you want to plan for plant rice. If you want to plan for a decade, plant a tree. If you want to plan for a century, educate a child. And that's what we're doing. We're planning for a century. And to be able to do that successfully, the parents need to be engaged in the entire process, from not just for what's going on in school, but from what's happening in the home.
So I want to echo Rabbi Sufrin and just say that it's so funny. When I was reading the question, what do you want parents and community members to know when raising kids and partnering with schools? I want to echo Rabbi Sufrin because my first reaction is to partner, sometimes I think it's hard to see that it goes back to what I answered before. It's hard to see that a high schooler really needs partnership. We tend to see two types of parents. They either helicopter a little too much, which on some level we appreciate, but we want them to give their kids space. What we see more so in high school is just a lot of giving kids independence, maybe prematurely, maybe too quickly. So really, to echo Rabbi Sufrin, we want a partnership. I really, really like what Rabbi Sufrin said about parents being lifetime learners and showing passion for their Yiddishkeit and their learning. I think that's absolutely true. But if I'm going to focus on our topic, which is COVID, what I want parents and community members to know the most is that it is my opinion that the population who is going to be most affected by COVID, when hopefully this is over, are the teenagers. Their loss is the greatest. And I also think that the younger grades, 9th and 10th, maybe not even as much as 11th and 12th graders, where they're learning to drive and they're used to hanging out with friends. They're used to having so much more freedom, and the losses are really great. And what I want parents to know is that it's very, very real. And when parents are struggling with Parnassa and 5 people are learning in the same house on Zoom, and there is so much going on, it's hard to really be compassionate when a teenager is feeling bad about a lack of social life, or they're feeling down about things that they don't have. But the truth is, the loss is really real for a teenager. And the fallout to the teenage population is going to be the greatest one. And so that, I think, is what I would like the community and the parents to know. And whatever the community can, whatever parents can give their teenager, every little bit of fun, every little bit of normal life in whatever is the abnormal will go a tremendously long way. Teenagers feel the most hopeless. Little kids are frustrated, they're disappointed, but we will eventually be able to see them through, maybe even make up for the things they didn't get or the places they didn't go. But teenage life, it's 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and there are specific things you get at each age or you're excited for it each time. You can't really go back and give that to somebody. Just like someone who has a different type of wedding they were hopeful for is excited to be married, but hopefully you will never be able to give them that wedding again. This is it. And in a similar, maybe less significant way, but there are many milestone moments in high school. You know, the way that teenagers are used to connecting, the way that they like to DMC with their teachers and the Rabbi, and now it has to be in masks or it has to be over Zoom. There are so many things for them that are very especially hard. And I just want us as a community to really be mindful of that the struggle is real, and it's not just sort of maybe teenage entitlement or selfishness, but it's actually real. And they are really stuck, and they don't honestly know what to do. And every little bit that we help them through is going to make a big difference at the end.
Yeah. Circling back to the beginning, though, it's like what you were saying. Sorry, Rabbi Glock, and then I'll give you the floor. Circling back to the beginning from our first question of the parents being home more so that they can address these issues, on the ground and get them running. Rabbi Block.
These were very beautiful and profound answers. I think it's really true. The partnership, noticing that there's real loss, for our students. I think it's really important. You mentioned Rabbi Sufrin, you mentioned Rabbi Sachs, and it actually made me think about a different idea, but something that really resonates in this particular idea. That Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, from the Racha, said that I remember he was interviewed at YU just a few years ago, I think, with Rabbi Dr. Arye, and he said that he thinks that the struggle of Yaakov, which was in last week's parsha, and the struggle of Yaakov really should be a blueprint of all Jews. I mean, he's wrestling with the Ish, or the angel of Chazal tell us, and before he leaves, so he says, "Please, give me a bracha." And he says, "Lo ashalecha im ki im berechtani." I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And they were kind of locked in a battle. There was a struggle there, and he said that's what a Jew has to do in the world. That you don't leave a struggle, you don't leave something that's difficult until you walk away with some bracha, until you take something with you. And I know it's been a theme throughout what I've been mentioning, but I do think it's really important for parents to take an opportunity to talk with their kids, about what is really most important. And I don't only mean, We're talking about whether we can talk about Talmud Torah and Tefillah, but it's also about what their well-being is. When the kids are sitting home all day and the parents and the kids are playing video games, or they're doing whatever it is, because there's depression and there's this and there's with friends. And I think parents really ought to think about what conversations are we uniquely suited to have right now. Last year we had some students seniors who kind of went on the path that they went on, that they were going to go on afterwards. A bunch went to Israel to study for a year. A few went to college. And then like a month or two in, they're like, wait a second, I have a unique opportunity in front of me. And I almost felt like maybe we didn't do a good job, or maybe their parents, maybe together, we didn't do a good job talking to them about, pause. This is different now, right? You don't have to worry. Colleges are no longer requiring, not all, are no longer requiring, right? Test optional, right? So what does that mean? Does that just mean that now you don't have to take tests? Maybe it means that there's a whole new array, meaning you can showcase yourself differently. You can apply to programs that you wouldn't have been able to apply to, or you can rethink some of the values and where you actually what you want to do next year. I mean, there's a whole world of options that open up that I'm not sure we're talking about as much. I think parents are also, and it really speaks to what Rabbi Sufrin said about the partnership. I think sometimes it's also when it's harder, right? When a kid is struggling and we call a parent, I'm sure we've all had this, when a parent starts defending their child, almost like ad absurdum, and you're looking and you appreciate the advocacy, but you're also like, you're enabling this, you're enabling that behavior, right? And we, in order to make this work, all we need is an acknowledgement that there's something that we need to work on. And I think that's part of that partnership, that right now during COVID, especially when parents so deeply are feeling the pain, sometimes they're not. Ms. Gross, I think you're right. Meaning sometimes they're just like, they don't appreciate the pain of their kids. Other times they exaggerate. My kid is so social and he's been doing nothing over the last little bit. So they feel that pain, and then they become these super advocates for their children. And I think it would actually be really impactful to sit down with them and say, you're absolutely right. But also, we're in COVID right now. How do we help them work through this? Instead of you keep on being upset about how they can't be more in person, like, how do we figure it out? And I think those are important questions. I think that's the lo ashalecha kim berachtani. Like, let's not leave this without actually taking something really valuable from it.
And I think your message really also says, let's not leave the whole COVID era without seeing the positives. I mean, all of it is pretty much negative. But if HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought this thing, then it behooves us, as you are saying, and as Rabbi Sufrin keeps mentioning, that our Shabbos tables are family times. Really, yes, obviously the negatives are clear, but what are the positives? Which I also hear in Lo Ashalechacha, that concept of wanting to be blessed. What are the brachos that HaKadosh Baruch Hu expects us to take from this time?
Absolutely, I love that.
It's a good mussar on ourselves also, because part of
you
being,
saying educators, right?
I'm saying part of being in chinuch, right, is we literally give our lives to the institution, which is our students, right? And many times at the expense of our own children, if we're being really honest with ourselves. And when the kids are really young, you don't fully understand. And they start getting older, you're like, whoa, what happened here? And part of this is, we're sitting here telling parents, the importance of that engagement and that importance of opening up that safer, making that meaningful Shabbos table. But we really have to be talking to ourselves also. I'll tell you, one of my earlier years as head of school, I scheduled a mid-year review. I wanted one. I thought it was important to get feedback on how my first few months as head of school at Yula was. And I came in so prepared. I've probably never been more prepared for a meeting. You're standing before the executive board. This sounds way more scary than it actually is, but just for the purpose of the story, why not, right? And you have your spreadsheets and your PowerPoint presentations, and you're going, this is what we've accomplished. This is what we're still going to do. This is how we're meeting our benchmarks and our goals. And you go into it and you give this, 20, 30 minute spiel and schmooze. And one of the executive board members, says, Rabbi Sufrin, this is really impressive, but I just want to ask you a question. I said, yeah, sure. I'm ready, because I got all the numbers at the tip of my tongue, and I know I'm ready. What is it? So it's so and so. Says, do you sit on the floor when you get home? I said, what? When you get home, do you ever sit on the floor? No, why would I sit on the floor? If anything, I'd sit on a chair. I was trying to like figure out, the purpose of the question. And this is a really brilliant guy. So anytime you get a question, you really have to think before you answer anyways. And when you don't understand the question, then you're really just confused. And he said, well, how old's your youngest? And I said, at the time, I said, I have a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, I was going through all the ages. Said, yeah, so this whole presentation is fantastic. And what you're doing in school is phenomenal. But if you get home and you're not sitting on the floor and playing with your kids, then it's just not worth it, right? If you're not investing time into your home, then you're not going to feel that meaning and that simcha and that nachas in your home. And you're going to look back and say, what did I do? Even though you're enjoying every second of it. And it was such an important mussar. And I'll tell you, for at least a week after that, I'll give it a whole week. I sat on the floor literally when I came. I realized my kids prefer to sit on chairs. We took it to the chairs, but the point, right? The point is that this concept of engagement, it's so important for us that we're investing in our own family as well. So we could be more successful as mechanchim, as mechanchim. The whole analogy of putting the mask on yourself before you put it on the passenger next to you on the plane. So we should get that. We're educators. We're always talking about parents and partnership and this. And we have to remember our role in it so we can be better partners for our parents and for our students. Just something I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I think all of us educators probably slowed down right when COVID hit. And it was like a shock that we were home every single night, not running to events, shiurim, planning something, having meetings, board meetings, and we were home for dinner every night. I think that honestly it was amazing. It's an incredible opportunity for all of us. But at the same time, we probably never thought we would ever get that. So it was also like an amazing positive that came out of it. And yeah, and then you kind of translate that when you're talking to parents and helping parents educate their own kids, telling them, stay home, be home with your kids. But, it was great mussar for myself. I know my mom said to me, it took a pandemic for you to slow down. So I resonate with all of that. Sorry, Rabbi Block, did you want to say something?
No, I agree. Beautifully said. Now that's the bracha. I think it's as Ms. Gross and Rabbi Sufrin and you said that's the looking at it and saying, okay, what am I personally going to take out of it? It's huge. I love everything that was said.
Personally, okay. There's one more question. It's one more. How do you think the educational environment will be different post-COVID? Should be a short question. Short.
I'll just say my last piece on this. I think that what we've learned from this is as scary and overwhelming and daunting of a task we've all had in our transition. There's so many great opportunities out there that one can benefit from. Unfortunately for the East Coast, it looks like snow days are over forever.
Yeah.
But the idea is that if you're not feeling well one day, or you need to be home, or you're out of town for a simcha, you don't really have to miss class anymore. You don't have to miss school. That might be a bad thing also, but I'm just saying there's some great opportunities. We've capitalized on the fact that Zoom is so easy. We've had the most incredible speakers address our students that could only work if they were in town, which would happen normally 3 times a year. Our students have probably been exposed to 20 to 20, maybe that's a little bit much, but to plus speakers that they wouldn't normally hear. Capitalizing on that opportunity. We're looking at some interesting online courses with tremendous educators in Eretz Yisrael now. And looking at just incredible opportunities to offer our students. And we may never pull the trigger on it, but the point is we've learned that there's unique opportunities. And even from a financial perspective, if there's an amazing teacher at Valley Torah, and I want Mrs. Gross to teach my students, maybe I could partner with Valley Torah. Maybe Mrs. Gross could teach a course on Zoom. She doesn't have to leave the building. She doesn't, I don't know if she wants to teach the Yula voice, but I wouldn't blame her, but the point is there's so many different opportunities out there, and And
Yeah.
and that's probably part of the bracha that Rabbi Sachs was talking about, that Rabbi Block quoted. And we should take advantage of it. And I just want to give everybody Yasher Koach here. I'm sure within your communities, it's incredibly challenging. So
Yeah, we are lucky to be amongst one another.
keep doing what you're doing.
So, yes, agreed.
I
Yes.
think also that in terms of, I don't know if you guys had this experience, but in terms of even just something small like the open house that we had to completely flip around and change and be creative and work together and scale down with the food and the swag and the music. And again, there was something so beautiful about having to meet with very few families at a time, getting to know every single student and their name and their family, and really giving the personal attention. And I think that goes beyond just the open houses. I think that goes beyond for every event that we have. And I think that, God willing, when this is all over and we all come out of it, God willing, I think that it's going to be amazing for our communities to have had a time to scale down and really look at within ourselves what's important and within our greater community of what's important with regards to school, simchas, and the like. Rabbi
Very
Block?
true.
Sure. I think that I definitely agree that what Sufrin was saying, we can think bigger, right? There are partnerships that can be created. There are technologies that we can use. I guess I would say that beyond the technology itself, which is obviously opens up so many doors. I think there's a part of education that's changed in that, at least I can say at Shalhevet, and I'm sure it really happened in all the schools, that when we went online, we started having to think, okay, how are we going to do this? Right? And how are we going to be creative, and what are the modalities that we can use? So then there's the technologies themselves, which are really important. But then there's also the idea of actually getting our faculty together to think about education, right? And that's really valuable. And we do that every so often, and we'll talk about, differentiated instruction, and but recently we've really kind of partnered together more to think about, hey, there's a challenge in one of our classrooms. There's something that's really hard. How do you do assessments online, right? We're all struggling with that. And actually having conversation with faculty and administration and saying, hey, we actually have more access to each other than maybe we realize that we do, right? And to be able to take that into the next era, so to say, into the post-COVID era, and to say, hey, just because now we are more familiar with education again, we're more familiar with a regular in-person classroom, doesn't mean we still shouldn't be collaborating to discuss how can we be better, right? What are the things? How can we as a community say, okay, it's right there in front of us, right? We don't necessarily need a pandemic to push us to think about how we can be more creative, how we can meet the needs of our students more regularly and more consistently. And I think that's something, I guess, more bigadol that I'm thinking about after all this.
Awesome. Thank
So
you.
funny. I'm going to take a whole different track and say that when COVID is over, I think that there are going to be tremendous family stressors of loss of parnasa. Sadly and terribly, I think some marriages are having a hard time and may chas v'shalom not make it. And I think that I also think that the students that come into high school, the ones we see, but even the ones we're going to get next year, they're going to be very much affected educationally. There's going to be gaps in their learning, their ability to focus, to concentrate. And those are the students that we're going to see over the next few years. It's what we have right now a little bit, and we're probably going to see it even more. And I think what we're going to face in a post-COVID era is to embrace that and to deal with that. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities there is already now, and there will be then, conversations regarding Emunah. And I think there will also be there can be an amazing, to kind of take what Natalie said earlier, the fact that our children will have more resilience after pushing through this. And we will then connect it for them and show them, how does a Jew handle themselves in crisis? So I think we're doing that right now. That is actually what we're doing and how we're getting through. But Emertz Hashem, even post-crisis, post-COVID, when hopefully things somewhat go back to any type of normal, the first thing is everyone can just walk around without a mask and you can see someone's face. How a Jewish community, how does the Torah want us to handle a crisis, want us to handle loss, want us to handle struggles? I think that's what we're going to be dealing a lot of. Some of that we're dealing with now, but some of our students are not even with us in person to actually be able to share that with us. So some are, but many aren't. They may be getting lost in the shuffle, or they don't even, I see with a lot of kids, they're not even articulating exactly what they're feeling. Those that I could get to personally, or those that tend to be more articulate, that's good. But those that are just not even sure, but when we sit back down into hopefully day-to-day classroom learning with that ability to interact again, that's what I think we're going to be looking at a lot. And again, to repeat what Natalie said, the resilience that they have will, Imrat Hashem, enable them to have emunah that they can make it, that they can do it, that they are stronger for it, actually.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Oh,
I think that's actually a very, a really poignant point. And I think it might actually even extend into shuls. We're talking about not just shuls, but communities maybe. And I think you're mentioning, like, how do we handle those questions of emunah? How do we handle those struggles? I think, what is a community, and how does our community respond to those things? And I think that when we're not going to shul, or weren't going to shul as regularly, and even still, right? Certainly not to a physical building, that what does community mean, and how do we support each other, like in these kind of new times? I think that's a really interesting thing to think about. Like those issues become exacerbated, and our tools to answer them are a little bit different right now.
wow.
Rock, it's interesting you mentioned that. I've been saying to some of our students, I've been pointing out to them that the losses are so great in COVID. The only thing really that's been maintained is Jewish community life. And even as fragmented and as odd as some of the things we've had to do to make up for what we don't have, the only thing our children and our families have is what the Jewish community is offering. It's actually pulled them closer. You know, some students, as you know, are thinking, well, maybe I should graduate high school earlier. This is always a question. And, you know, I said to some juniors, now is not the time to talk about that. Let's talk about that later in the year. But what is outside of the Jewish community? There really is nothing going on. And they've paused and they're like, you know what? You're right. I said, what you have is your rabbi, whether, like you said, in your makeshift shul, you know, any Jewish organization you're joining right now, whether it's an organization on Zoom or it's something your school is offering in person. It's really giving kids a chance to pause and say, you're so right. That's true. You know, and again, maybe that's what's going to keep them in the fold even more, which is actually exciting.
It's interesting, Mrs. Gross, because I tell my staff a lot, and the Talmidim in my share, I say, you know, if you think about it, for the last few months, you've only come to Yula for Torah study, for something related to Torah. You come for minyan. Before we even had Sherm on campus, we had minyan every day. We had minyan. So you come for davening with Seaboard and to learn Torah. If that doesn't tell you what Yula stands for, that when everything's closed and we're still having davening every day, and you're still expected to come in, and I think there were health benefits to it also, but you're coming to daven. That doesn't tell you how Yula distinguishes itself and says, we're expecting you to be here and to learn Torah, right? And if that doesn't tell you what Yula stands for, and it doesn't tell you how much it's a big part of your life. Look, when you leave the house, you're really only leaving for Torah purposes right now, right? You're not, and you go home for, at least in Yula boys, they go home for their general studies. Most of them do, at least, you know. So I think it builds on that point. So thank you for saying that.
Great.
Sure.
Thank you so much, everyone. I know that the hour is late and you probably all have to go, but I just really want to just end by first of all saying I'm sure that we all appreciate our teachers in our school and our colleagues for working so hard around the clock for the past couple of months. That goes without saying. I also want to thank all of you so much for coming on this Zoom and this panel and being ready to share and contribute. And also, I really do appreciate being amongst all of you, and just I appreciate that we could work together, and we are lucky to have one another, our community strong, and hopefully this will not be the last meeting that we have. So thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate it, and I hope we can do this again.
Hanukkah.
Much.
Thank you.